I'm just going with the flow here. So. I'm seeing sort of a FBI movie right now playing in my mind. So they're just grabbing people off the streets, and then all of a sudden this guy gets thrown into the cell with you, or next to you. And you ask the guy why he's there, and he's like, I don't even know. These guys came over and I thought they were mobsters. I totally thought all this time that they were mafia, and then I found out it was the federal government. And this entire time I thought they were the mafia. And they just grabbed me and threw me, and I got thrown in here, and I didn't, you know, I didn't even see any handcuffs. But now there's a judge saying I'm going to be here for so long, and they were undercover, and nobody's explained to me why I'm even here. Okay, so then that guy gets to sit in jail for a long time. And then a couple other people, and then in the meantime, his property, it goes into forfeiture, basically, because he's in jail, and he cannot make his house payments without being able to work, and maybe he doesn't have power of attorney or somebody who can take care of the really important matters like that in his absence. He just never, ever has thought that he would be basically kidnapped off of the sidewalk and thrown into jail. And so all of a sudden, he's not just being punished for something that hasn't been tried yet in court. He's also losing his house, his job, and of course his reputation. Everybody was wondering why in the world he's in jail, and anymore it's like if you go to jail or you get arrested, people do kind of wonder if maybe you did something. And I mean, people, they just don't, and then judges don't tell everybody in the jury or tell the lawyers, you know what, I'm just gonna make the shots here. I think that this guy needs to go to jail for about, I don't know, a year, 2 years. Nobody, the public defender could write up as many motions as they want, trying to make it look like, okay, well, this is why we did this to this guy. And the FBI can put in as many reports as they want saying, this is why we assisted. And the judge can say, I've heard a lot of bad things, and all of these documents are so horrific that there's no way I can let you go, and I sentence you to 2 years of jail. Well, what if the entire time they're just doing things like this, right and left? They're just pulling people in to the jail. And people start to wonder, I mean, like, imagine, for me, it's just like my situation, I think, like, I can't imagine that it's happening to a bunch of people all around me. But imagine they do it with me, if you do it with me and a couple of other people here and there. All of a sudden, they start feeling like, this is pretty good, you know, she didn't get that job, and now my cousin's daughter got that job. I mean, she was just talking about how there's this great job opening, now the position needs to be filled. I mean, you could do some really dirty things, having power of authority. Really dirty things. You can change the course of someone's life completely just by making one quote-unquote negligent mistake. And, you know, just try to pass it off as, well, we didn't know what we were doing. We did the best that we could on the information that we had. And that doesn't fly, because when people finally figure out that, you know, there's a lot more information that you did have and you did know all along, and that excuse isn't an excuse anymore. So that is pretty much how I was being treated by CPS. And the only time that they ever thought, I mean, and, you know, so basically you could have somebody who has all this this paperwork written up, and then it kind of means nothing. The fact is that even if this man that the FBI, undercover FBI, is claiming, even if he did all these different things, they never had a legal right to kidnap him and not read him his rights and not tell him he was under constant 24-hour surveillance without any kind of warrant or anything like that the whole time. I mean, I guess they would say that they do have a right to do the 24-hour surveillance type stuff now. But they can't just try to cover up for a kidnapping with, you know, a bunch of crimes and then sentence someone to a horrible sentence and then force them to lose their kids and their house and their career and everything. So that's what this one man in Tennessee who had this case against CPS, that's what he was proving, and he won. He was proving it wasn't a case where he was appealing because, you know, the courts did something wrong somewhere along the line in the court system. His entire case for getting his kids back was that they never had jurisdiction and they made it look like they did, but they really kidnapped his kids. And I think what was happening is that at the very beginning when they took my son Oliver from me and intruded into my affairs in Canada and used Canadians to collude with them, I think that they knew when I said a couple of things that sounded sort of legalish, or when I started spouting legalese, they knew that oh great, what if then she goes to the Hague Convention, which basically is where you can have a whole court process because you're claiming that your child has been kidnapped by the government. And there were other avenues that I had right at the very beginning, but I only knew a few things, and then they figured that out. They basically wanted to find out how much I knew and if I was going to be in a position to work against them. And then when they figured out that I didn't know all of the law and I didn't realize what a strong case I had right from the start to go to some kind of authority, they decided to keep my son, and from that point on they always were determined to break the bond between me and my son. They never demonstrated any kind of following the rules to keep the child in a safe state of mind, to not traumatize a child, and to facilitate, to try to encourage as many visits as possible. I mean, I wasn't going to these visits with beer on my breath and on drugs or whacked out. So why in the world, if the state is keeping a child from somebody, why would anybody think that the best thing for that child who's so traumatized by losing his mother and thinking that, you know, this drastic traumatic separation, they think that 2 visits for an hour once a week, or 2 visits a week for an hour is okay for that child. That's what's in that child's best interests. They always knew. I always knew right from the start that what they were doing was they were destroying my son. They were trying to destroy me. I think a lot of people wanted me to be in a nut house. And they were destroying my son. And then they tried even harder to have me go to a nut house, because then they were traumatizing my son and allowing him to be tortured in front of me. So it wasn't just the initial knowledge of knowing that my son was suffering from being separated from me. They later introduced torture, and they allowed me and wanted me to see what torture evidence and marks were on his body, which was really disgusting and shocking. And the only thing that I have ever heard of that is anything that goes along with those lines at all is CIA. Only the CIA and military intelligence use those kinds of tactics for things such as MK Ultra. The only place you can find something like that is is MK Ultra programs, which is basically mind control programming of people to work for the United States whether they want to or not. Torture, behavioral modification, research. Basically, you can put anybody into one of those programs that you just don't like. If you have a friend that's in high enough position in government, you can call it research all you like. You can still, you can call it research, and really it's concentration camp. Well, like, basically, that would be a great way to discredit the Holocaust, too, wouldn't it? Oh, we don't have, that's what the United States would do today. We don't have concentration camps. We're not exterminating people. It's research and it's classified. We're not anti-competitive. It's research. This is national interest. Did you see that? Did you see that? Now, can't you see the importance of that? Just overlook their suffering for a minute and think about how this will help our entire nation. The United States mindset in torturing children and families is no different than the mindset of the Holocaust. And I use Holocaust only because it's such a common colloquial term, that everybody knows. But I've read things about German people who have been persecuted in Eastern Europe concentration camps, and some of their suffering is described as being even worse than anything that ever happened in the Holocaust. I've heard of people who are in all kinds of different kinds of concentration camps. So people all over the entire world are familiar with of hearing about people who are tortured. Their own kind of people, their own race or nation, nationality, whatever. It doesn't matter who you are in any part of the world. Countries in general can relate to that idea because different groups have forced other groups to suffer for some reason or another. And so here I was trying to do all of these. Now, as you can see, it took a long, big tangent here, but I am coming back to where I was starting. And what I'm saying is, as you can see, is that, no, not is that, but as you can see, any attempt by me to comply with quote-unquote services really there was no point in how it was going to work to get me and my son back, because the state had already decided that they didn't want me to have my son. Period. So anything that they did was basically just to take advantage of the position that they had me in and try to extort information out of me that mainly my enemies could use against me. And they therefore then gave me a psychological evaluation, claimed that it was all about my son, when it wasn't. It was all about politics and about my legal adversaries that I've had in the past who have always wanted to say I was mentally ill. It's about people that I've made reports against and people where I've been acting as a whistleblower who didn't want me to be credible. That psychological evaluation was to benefit those individuals. It had nothing to do with, my parenting or let's figure out what she's really about. Telling me that I had to have an IQ test, that had nothing to do with my parenting abilities. And I had several psychologists even tell me over the phone that that was highly unorthodox. They said the only time they ever see IQ evaluations on a parent is if the parent seems to be incapacitated in some ways, for example, mentally ill, or not mentally ill, mentally retarded. So if someone's mentally retarded, or seems to be very slow and can't keep up with their child, or maybe is of such a low intelligence level they can't meet their needs in some way, then there is sometimes a court-ordered IQ test. Otherwise, nobody in CPS gives parents IQ tests.